Thorgal. It's a French-Belgian comic series that has been around for literally decades, since the 70s, but it is virtually unheard of in the West. And thankfully to a Patreon supporter of mine, he has requested that I take a look at this story, and after reading the first few chapters, I am pretty interested. The amount of creativity and classic fantasy-style storytelling is off the charts, and it's really hard to explain what this is about. But along the way, you're going to get Viking sword fights, mythological creatures, giant snakes, time vortexes, and spaceships. Yeah, fucking spaceships. All done with that classic comic art style that is kind of lost among modern day comics. So how do I explain Thorgal? Well, in order to do so, I will kind of have to spoil it. It's kind of just the way that it goes, because it has a very unique thing about how the story is told, and this might again be part of the more of old school comic style of writing. It's that even though it tells one full connected story, each chapter has a beginning and end of its own, kind of like a shorter story. So in a way, it works where you can kind of start Thorgal at any point, and though you would be missing things, it would still be telling you a complete story within 50 pages. An adventure that Thorgal goes on, or some event that happens to him. It all begins and ends within 50 pages, but if you put those stories together back to back to back, it also tells a much larger narrative. It's probably done this way because of how comics used to be released, and before people binge them in volume or omnibus format. This way, you were free to jump in whenever, and you wouldn't be totally lost. But it would also reward the readers that had been there from the very start with a more full, comprehensive narrative. I started it at the very beginning, which is a storyline called The Betrayed Sorceress. It takes place within the Viking era, and in the very first chapter, the main character Thorgal is strapped to a rock against the rising tide, soon to be dead, put there by a guy named Gandalf, who isn't too happy that Thorgal wants to marry his daughter. After leaving him there to rot, he is rescued by this ginger babe with one eye, who has a pet wolf who also says that she will free him if he swears that he will be her servant for 1 year. Between that or death, he takes the bargain. And right away you know that Thorgal is a man of honor. He could overpower this woman perhaps, or wait for a moment to strike, but he is true to his word instead. And what I like about him as a protagonist is that, similar to Thorfinn in Vinland Saga, he's mostly a pacifist that stays true to his word, reminding me of that foregone era where people used to live by a sense of honor and duty. He begins working for her, facing down some giants and a dwarf, obeying all of her commands. So yes, immediately and without question, we know that this world is in a fictionalized version of Viking history, adding in many dark fantasy elements that we've known about, and that's just the very tip of the iceberg. There's one moment where Thorgal falls underneath the ice caps and lands in a luscious green forest, and meets two beautiful women that approach him out of nowhere. Oh yeah, that's something I noticed too. He's always running into these gorgeous women everywhere he goes, and yet he only wants to be with Aricia. He's a good man. He's a man that will not be swayed and seduced by the wiles of femme fatales. But anyways, they tell him that he's fallen into a realm where time moves differently, and that they are both hundreds of years old. Also, that there is no escape. Desperately, Thorgal looks for a way out, and he is approached by the women's younger sister, who appears to be only a teenager, and tells him that they have been lying to him in order to trap him here, and that she also wishes to escape with him. The two of them hunt and forage their way out, and when they finally do manage to escape, it's as if their body ages the appropriate time that they were trapped. For Thorgal, he grows a beard, but for him it was only 1 year, but for the young girl, she was not so young after all. She ages hundreds of years all the way up past her death and becomes nothing more than a corpse that is left behind. But that's only the very beginning. In the next chapter, Island of the Frozen Sea, is when things get really weird. Aricia is captured by these three eagles, and Thorgal and her brother Bjorn cross the sea in search of her, taking them to this mysterious and mystical part of the world stuck in a frozen tundra that few dare enter. The natives of this area said that some time ago a cataclysm happened, something strange ignited in the sky, and they reclused themselves underground within the mountains. They bring Thorgal and Bjorn to this powerful knight, the Lord of the Three Eagles, and as a duel is about to take place, the knight throws their sword down and states that they just captured Aricia, so Thorgal would come there. They have something very important to tell him. And before Thorgal can understand why, Bjorn just shoots an arrow into the knight's neck. What a dickhole! Well, anyways, then it's cathartic to see him get pecked to death by the three eagles, but still. Turns out that knight was actually a girl and the daughter of the red-haired babe that was the woman that rescued Thorgal from the beginning, who was the queen of this iced land. And this is where things get extra weird. Thorgal enters this strange-looking thing that is actually a motherfucking spaceship. Thorgal meets with the Ginger Queen once more, and she explains that, yes, you guessed it, Thorgal is from goddamn outer space. The ship crashed here, it was unrepairable, and they all died out over time except for baby Thorgal, who was sent off in a little pod into the ocean and was found and raised by Vikings. But far as I can tell, from what I've read so far at least, there doesn't seem to be much of a physiological difference between him and the humans. He's not super powerful like Superman or Goku. He's just simply not of this world. The next chapters are called Child of the Stars, which recount Thorgal's backstory. So instead of letting you know right away, it saves the backstory until after the reveal of his birthplace. And we learn a lot here. We learn about how he first met Aricia, about the people that came from space, their technology, and even an old wizard that turns out to be one of the final survivors of that ship. And he happened to erase all of Thorgal's memory of everything that he had learned up until that point. Now, this is on top of all the wild fantasy stuff that also takes place here. We got gnomes, giant snakes, a cat with wings. Yeah, a lot of weird shit happens here. The last chapter I read goes back to the present time, and it's called The Elders of Aran. Here we got Thorgal and Aricia traveling together and just being adorably in love and making me kind of jealous and sad. But anyways, they get caught up in this town where a challenge is to free this necklace using only one arrow. And Aricia just uses logic and cuts it down with one arrow instead of trying to fire it from a bow, and success! They make her queen. Only that means that they take Thorgal away from her, and now he needs to enter into this competition with all of these other men trying to vie to be her husband. Really, he's just there to get his girl back, but hey, he's got to do what he's got to do. Then the fantasy elements start to ramp up, and it becomes this weird game of conspiracy and cover-ups, and these three lords vying for immortality and using this contest to get someone young and strong to do their dirty work for them. So, as you can see, each chapter, as it were, tells this full little adventure and story, but it all comes together into one larger ongoing comic series. I know there is a ton of comics within this series, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to them all, but it is something that I'm going to casually keep checking out because it just gives you that feeling of like a very classic fantasy tale, something along the lines of Clash of the Titans or another 80s epic, but instead it's in the Viking era instead of medieval times. Not to mention the science fiction elements that pop up periodically as well that always throw a wrench into things but make it just that much more interesting. It's a story that can certainly do whatever it wants to, and I appreciate it for that. It has the freedom to explore within both the worlds of magic and monsters and also into futuristic concepts. I would highly recommend giving it a read, though it is extremely hard to find on this side of the world. I did manage to find them online, but it was really difficult to do so. Also, getting a physical copy can be even more difficult. Also, I'm not 100% sure, but I have read online from some other people saying that the English translations are actually a bit censored. Now, I don't know if what I read was censored or if it was censored for language or violence or what exactly was cut out, but that is a big disappointment, especially if you wanted to own them all in your own personal collection. But nevertheless, Thorgal was a fun ride from what I've experienced so far, and I'll definitely be checking out some more adventures within this world, and I hope that you guys do as well. If you have heard of Thorgal before, please tell me what you think about it and how you first found it, because this was unheard of to me until I was told about it. And if you haven't, hopefully I might have turned you on to something new and different, and thanks again to my Patreon supporter for suggesting it to me in the first place. If you enjoyed this video, guys, please give it a thumbs up because it will really help me in the algorithm as well with any comments that you might leave. Also, check the links in the description if you'd like to help out the channel on that deeper level, such as joining the Patreon. Even for as low as $1 a month is super helpful. There's also the merch store as well. You'll find all the various social media links where you guys can follow me. Other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.